let's welcome Janine Ward from SpaceNet and country correspondent for IACD in South Africa. Welcome, madam.
Thank you. Thanks, Daniel, and welcome to everybody. It's lovely to have you here, and especially to have our friends and guests from South Africa. We hope that we'll be able to encourage you to head over to the IACD website and also become members of this wonderful organization, because we're trying to build a good network in South Africa. So it would be great to have more of you on board. There's Taraneh and Daniel and myself at the moment, and a few others in South Africa, but we would love to expand our network further. So I'm going to share my screen with you, and I hope you can all see that. Let me just put it onto slideshow. Can you see that?
All good, thank you.
Okie dokes. So, starting with a quote. Go to the people, live among them, learn from them, love them. Start with what they know, build on what they have. But of the best leaders, when their task is done, the people will remark, we have done it ourselves. Does anybody know who said these words and when? Any ideas? People often think it could be someone like Nelson Mandela, or it could be somebody like Mother Teresa, or it could be Gandhi, someone like that, some sort of famous person. Let me just see, somebody saying in the chat. Yes, people think that it could be Gandhi. These words were actually spoken by Lao Tzu, a Chinese philosopher, 650 years before Christ was born. So if you think about it, we've basically had the recipe for ABCD almost 3,000 years ago, which is mind-blowing if you think about it. So, sorry, let me just move on. So the term ABCD, which refers to asset-based community development or asset-based citizen-led development, it was coined by two Americans, both called John, John McKnight and John Kretzmann, in the mid-80s, when they were working in neighborhoods in America. And they were challenging the traditional needs-based kind of service provision approach to development, where we go to communities, ask them what do they need, and then provide what it is that they're looking for. And so they came up with this term ABCD. At about the same time, I was newly married and I was living in Swaziland in the rural area, completing my social work studies, and I had to do a practical project, and I started to work in this area that had been, sorry, if people can just mute. I started working as a young social work student in this area, and in this area of people that had been displaced to make way for a sugar estate. And I came across that quote. My parents gifted me with a set of community development handbook set, and I saw this quote by Lao Tzu in that book, and I thought, this makes sense to me. This is how I would like to do community development. And so I started way back in the mid-80s, working as much as I could, following that kind of a philosophy, not realizing that the other side of the ocean at the same time, these two Johns were busy putting together this whole ABCD framework. And I think the key thing about ABCD is that it really is, it's a worldview, it's a lifestyle, it's a way of thinking, a way of living. It's not just a program or a technique. And I think that is the key thing that I want to start off by saying, so that people understand it really needs to become part of who you are and part of how you operate in life. And so if you have a look at this picture, for instance, happiness will never come to those who do not appreciate what they already have. These youngsters have obviously seen people playing pool on TV perhaps, And so they've made a plan with mud and with sticks and little balls of plastic probably, and they're having a great time. Sorry, can we ask people who are not talking to please mute themselves so that it doesn't give us feedback? And here you have an example of two different perspectives in life. Charlie Brown says, someday we will all die, Snoopy. So he's got a very miserable outlook on life. And Snoopy says, yeah, that's true. But on every other day, we will not. So it really is a question of perspective. It is a way of thinking, as well as being an approach to development. It's a conscious effort that focuses on strengths, abilities, opportunities, talents, and gifts as a foundation or a starting point. It's an orientation to use what we have and to build from there. So it really is development from the inside out. Communities will then use their own assets as leverage or bargaining power when they want to engage with stakeholders and to form other kinds of partnerships. So you can really capture the spirit of ABCD with the slogan, start where you are, use what you have, and do what you can. So some of the key ABCD principles. A starting point is the belief that nobody has nothing. When we go into communities, when we engage with people, we must never assume that the people that we are working with or the people that we're reaching out to have nothing, that they desperately need us and we need to save them and go in there and give them the things that they need. Everybody, if you're still alive, you have something. It might just be time, it might just be a bit of experience, it might be indigenous knowledge, it might be something very, very simple. You might just have energy or passion for something, but nobody has nothing. And stories of success are the key starting point. So when we engage in a community, when we start working with people, the key thing is to start asking people, what has worked in your life? What has gone well before for you? Because if we start by saying to people, what is wrong, or what don't you have, we immediately pull people into a negative deficit mentality. But if we start by saying, what works? What is going well for you? What are times in your community where something might have gone well? You maybe had a disaster like a flood or an earthquake, but the community pulled together. And we're seeing examples of that in COVID at the moment, how people are pulling together and sharing resources and feeding each other and doing things for each other. Those are our stories of success. And when we start by asking those questions and by appreciating people, we're saying, you have value. I'm seeing your common humanity. And in Africa in particular, in South Africa, when we greet people, we say sawubona. It means I see you. I recognize the common human in you. And what we are doing is we're also stimulating an opportunity-seeking mindset by helping people to focus on what is already there and what is available and what is possible. We are helping people to have that opportunity-seeking mindset, a positive mindset. Through the power of collaboration and social capital, the way we connect with each other, the networks that we have. And we help people to understand the importance of mobilizing community assets. Because people have things, people have assets that they could be volunteering, they could be contributing towards some kind of community building effort. And then social entrepreneurship is the key that will stimulate economic capital. So people need to be getting busy and making little businesses and doing things so that they can stimulate the economy. And a key aspect of the ABCD process is that it really is like a three-stage process. We need to start up in the top left-hand corner by helping people to have that mind shift, to stop thinking about things as being half empty and looking at what they don't have and having that deficit kind of begging mentality, and to look at what they do have. Yes, the glass may not be 100% full, but it's half full, and it's half full with talents and gifts and strengths that are available that can be used to help to fill that glass more fully. And it's very important to focus and spend time on that kind of mind shift. So we do all sorts of fun activities where we look at videos and we do exercises and we do all sorts of things to help people to shift that way of thinking. Because if you have a half-empty mentality, you're not able to think of opportunities. You're just sitting there thinking about what you don't have. And so that is a key part of the process, is starting by having that mind shift. And then you move towards a mapping exercise, and there are different assets that we map in the ABCD. And again, those are very participatory, very fun. There's community mapping, there's mapping of individual, like doing an asset audit, individual skills, there's the association mapping that you do for social skills. Lots of different fun activities where people can get to know what it is that they have. If you think of when you go grocery shopping, if you just go into the shop and start looking around and taking stuff, you don't already know what's in your kitchen. You need to start by opening your cupboard doors and checking and saying, okay, I have bread, I've got eggs, I've got brown sugar. What I don't have are apples and washing powder. So we need to start by knowing what we have before we can go out and get what we don't have. And in the same way, with ABCD mapping exercises, you are looking to see what is already available that sometimes you might have forgotten or you don't realize is actually an asset. And then the third key part of the whole process is to then say, well, what do we do about all these assets? We have to form linkages. We have to start looking at how we can mobilize these assets for the good of the community. If we just stop after the mapping exercises, we wouldn't be completing the task. So the third vital element of the process is to do the linkages and to start connecting assets with people, with organizations, and then saying, okay, what we don't have is a little bit of funding or a bit of expertise in beekeeping. That's something that we need to pull in, but for the rest, we have all sorts of other things. So it is like a three-phase process. And it doesn't always just go smoothly in a linear fashion. Sometimes you have to go back and revisit the mapping or revisit the mind shift stuff. So it's kind of quite a circular process in the actual fact. The 6 key ABCD assets, if you look on the outside of this little picture, there's the appreciative inquiry, there's the storytelling, community experience, history, and past success stories. And that is where I was saying, you start by doing the storytelling. You start by focusing on getting to know people, because we must never go into a community of people and just assume that it's just this big lump of the community. There's no such thing as the community. The community is made up of individual people, and every individual person has got their own experience, their own history, their own stories, and we need to recognize those individuals within that community. And when you start by using the appreciative inquiry technique of asking positive questions, that's when you get people to come forward and tell you stories and tell you of the things that they are able to help with. And then in the middle of that, the little pictures show the 5 sustainable livelihoods assets that were identified by DFID, the Department for International Development in the UK. The 5 sustainable livelihood assets of individuals, so human capital, social capital, physical capital, which is man-made buildings and clinics and roads and like infrastructure. Natural capital is basically what God has given us: the sunshine, the rain, the land, the crops, the animals. And then fifth, the last one is the financial assets. And it's interesting when we do the ABCD process in this order, you start with the stories and then you move to the middle and start doing the mappings. It's almost like people forget about the money. If you go into a community and say to people, what do you need? Then they'll say, we want money. We need money for this. We need money to build a creche. We need money for our food gardens. We need money for this and that. But when you start in the opposite direction and you start with the stories and then you start looking at human assets and social assets and so on, by the time you come to the money side of it, people almost like, oh, we forgot that we need money for this because they've already started to identify possibilities with all the other assets that they have. So that is where the empowering part of ABCD comes in. You might think that this all sounds a little bit romantic and idealistic. So the question is, does this really work? And if we go back to that young social work student 35 years ago, I started working in this community needing to do a practical element for my degree. And I naively thought I would just be there for a year and then I'll get my social work degree and go off and get a job as a social worker. But as I started working in the community, the key element that the women mentioned is that they needed small projects to help them get regular income to feed their families on a monthly basis, because basically the men were at work on sugar estates or further afield in South Africa and were not around, but the women needed to basically keep the family alive during the month. And their main income in that area was cotton crops, which was an annual, very small annual income. So they said to me they needed to make some smaller projects, and we talked about what they needed. And one of the things was, it was an area without electricity, and they said they wished they could have their own candles. So with a very small amount of money that I was receiving from the local church, I went off and bought some beeswax, and we started making our own candles by dipping string into boiling candle wax. So there you see the bottom picture is the candles for sale in the little shop. And then a few young men came forward and said they'd like to also get involved in projects. They needed to build a preschool for the children and so on. And so we found an appropriate technology machine that was like a big compress that you could just put a bit of cement and clay into the machine and make our own bricks. And then we needed a storeroom for us to be able to keep some of the equipment that we now were collecting. And so the men said to me, let's just make a small storeroom. And we didn't have enough bricks at the time. And they said to me, just go to the local sugar estate club and fill the back of your car with empty beer cans. So I came back with all these beer cans, and the children filled the cans with soil. And you can see the back wall of that little storeroom is made out of beer cans and then topped up with some stones. And the incredible thing is we made that as a temporary structure just to help us keep our stock safe. That building is still standing 35 years later. It's now running as a little village shop. You could go there and have your cell phone charged, you could have your shoes repaired, you could have a barber's haircut. So it is still operating as a little village store, but it was all made out of stuff that we basically had around in the area. More recently, I've been working with a non-profit organization here in Johannesburg called Jewels of Hope, and they are living in an informal settlement area where people are all on top of each other, similar to the shanties in Nairobi. And we did an ABCD process where we helped them to map out and identify the skills that they have and the things that they felt that they could do. And the women came forward and said, we've got so many skills in craft and handiwork. So the one lady has started making these beautiful bags, and I've sent quite a few overseas to be sold. Some of the other ladies are weavers. The other mat on the table with the bright colors is like a grass mat, but she's wrapped up chip packets, so sweetie packets on top of them to make them bright colors. And they started making these that we are now able to share with corporates when they want to have corporate gifts for some of their functions and so on. So again, it was an exercise of them just identifying what it is that they had as an asset and finding ways of using it for economic sustainability. You may think that sounds all very nice, but it's just very much kind of small scale, community level stuff. But in fact, ABCD works in many different sectors, right through to corporate. And here is an example of a big project that I did with SAPI. SAPI is a paper producing international company. And in South Africa, SAPI has had a lot of problems with, sorry, I'm just checking the chat box. They had a lot of problems with local communities living alongside their tree plantations, setting fire to the forests because people were unhappy and feeling like they didn't have jobs and so on. And SAPI had a program where they were providing support to communities. They would go and build a creche or build a playground or do something like that, but it wasn't always what the community wanted. They were doing very much kind of a come in and provide something and go out again. And the community was getting very upset, and they started setting fire to the neighboring plantations. And so SAPI realized that this was obviously causing them a lot of financial strain, but also, you know, it was unpleasant to be working in those kind of tense conditions. So they called us in and said, how else can we do this? And so I took this group of the managers through a 3-day ABCD process where we mapped out things and we got them to think in a different way. And it was very interesting because in the first day I could see these men who are used to being very busy on their laptops all the time, having important meetings, working on huge spreadsheets of financial numbers and so on. They were thinking that I was a bit mad asking them to draw little pictures of communities and so on. But by the 3rd day, I couldn't stop them. The tallest man in the background there, Leander Jarvis, he was the CEO, and he was sitting looking on his phone how to draw a piglet and how to draw a chicken. And he was so into the whole mapping exercise, I couldn't stop him. And by the end of the workshop, he said that SAPI wants to adopt the ABCD way of working, and this is going to be how they move forward with their different communities in the future. And over about 5-year period, what we did was we worked with them to develop a program called Abashinshi. And in Zulu, if you shinsha something, to shinsha is to change. So they basically came up with this program of creating change agents in the communities where they were working. And they would ask each community to nominate 2 people per community who would be trained, and they were usually younger people, train them in ABCD skills. And in life skills, and in basic business entrepreneurship skills. And so what we did was, over the period of about 5 years, in 2 of different provinces in South Africa. Sorry, can people mute, please? If you're not.
Want to also kindly mute your mic?
So we worked on this Abashinshi program where we had 2 young people from each community, and they would be trained in ABCD, in life skills, and in small business skills. And over the years, helping the community members to identify business opportunities, start the small businesses, start community projects with the help of SAPI, but based on what the community members said they wanted to do, rather than SAPI just coming in and providing what they thought the community needed. And the organization has, over the last few years, won several international awards for this type of approach, because it's not often that a corporate takes the time to invest in a way like this. And they've developed hundreds of small businesses and community projects in all the communities where they are running forestry operations in KwaZulu-Natal and in the Mpumalanga area. And it's totally changed the way the company works. And of course, not surprisingly, the numbers of fires drastically went down, because people were feeling like they were appreciated, they were getting involved in something that was helping them to build the community, and the relationships between SAPI and the communities has drastically improved. So ABCD is not just for small rural communities, for little women's groups. It is actually a lifestyle, it's a way of thinking, it's a way of working in development that we really should be pushing through governments, through corporates, through community organizations, through faith-based organizations. It really is a way of honoring everybody and using assets which are already there, which really makes the best sense. So that's a very, very short nutshell of what ABCD is all about. There's my email address and my cell phone number. I thank you all for listening, and if anybody has any questions, or if Daniel would like to lead a discussion going forward, thank you very much for your time.
I'm listening, Auntie.
Thank you, Janine, for your presentation. And well, it's a welcome presentation, illuminating and ultimately taking us to the basics that we can actually do community development from whichever place we are in, because the resources are already there. And so if we start with that mindset, then we can already start assisting our communities. Well, a lot of applause for Janine for a wonderful presentation. You are muted, I can't hear your applause, but you can do it electronically. Thank you very much. Now, if you have questions, I think the easiest way is put it on the chat so that then Janine can be able to respond. But also you can also voice it. Also, we are 25 of us. We are not likely to fit in our small screen, so I'm not able to see who is who. But if you unmute yourself and speak, or you put your question on the chat, Janine will be able to question or comment on the chat. Then we can be able to respond and to get the process going. Meanwhile, I'm pasting the link for joining IACD on the chat for those who are not members of IACD. If you link into that, then it will direct you on how to become a member of IACD, and you can join this large team of community development practitioners in our region.
Hi, this is Blossom. I have a question for the presenter. It was a very informative presentation, and I like the idea of what SAPI did to identify 2 young people in the community. But I wanted to know what process was followed in identifying the young people. Was it in facilitation with the community? Because I'm thinking if you have to do it the wrong way, it might cause some conflict where other youngsters might feel, yeah, they were not given a chance to be part. So I wanted to know the process of identifying these young people in each community. Was it the community identifying the young people, or what? How was that done?
Thanks, Blossom. Yeah, that's a very important question. And I think, as you say, that makes a critical difference. The process was that the leadership of the community was first of all approached, and the whole process about the Abashinshi program was explained to them, together with the SAPI member as well as the consulting organization that I worked with. And the community was informed about the whole process and asked if they would identify the people that they wanted to have in those roles of the young people. The reason why they went for the young people is because of the high unemployment rates, and they were finding that it was the youngsters who were the angry ones who were going and setting fire to the trees. So they felt that if they had young people, they would be the ones who could then give a different message to the community members. And that is why it worked, because it was not people that were picked out by the consulting organization or by SAPI, but it was the community members saying, these are the people that we would listen to, and these are the people that we would like to hear from. So that is why it was a success.
Thanks for that. Yeah, and it also gave the ownership back to the community to say, yes, these people were elected by them. They're taking ownership, accountability. Yeah, thanks for that, Janine.
Sure.
Okay, thank you, Blossom, for your question, and thank you, Janine, for the response. We have some 3 questions on the chat from Nafi. And also Dave has also raised some question. I don't know that you can be able to follow your chat from the chat.
So the question from Nafi, what is your major challenge in the process of making people use ABCD? It is a challenge because of the fact that traditionally development has become a needs-based response. And so people tend to, especially when you come into a community as an outside person, and sadly in this part of the world also depending on the color of your skin. So when I was in that area in Swaziland, people saw my white skin, they saw that I came from the sugar estate, and they immediately assumed that I was going to come with money, I was going to come with goods, and many times I would arrive in the community in my little vehicle and they would come running and look in the back of the car and say to me, you haven't brought anything. What are you here for? And I'd say, let's just talk. And we would sit under the tree and we would talk. And I think the key thing is to show your authenticity as a person who's trying to engage with the community, and it's like that idea of stepping forward by stepping back. And it's very difficult to do, because in our nature, if we have that kind of helping spirit and that kind of compassion that we feel that we want to help others, we tend to want to go rushing in and have the ideas and come up with the resources. And many times you have to just get a conversation going and then sit back and say nothing. So that you allow people to come with the ideas for themselves. And you have to keep coming there, because a lot of people go in and out, and if things don't seem to be working in a short space of time, they say, I can't work with this community, let me go and look for somewhere else to work. And I ended up working in that community for 13 years. It's not a quick process. It's not something that you can just go in there and do very quickly. The SAPI process took 5 or 6 years before people kind of got it, that they need to look. But it's that focusing on that mind shift at the very beginning that I was talking about. You have to spend time on that, and you have to help people to think differently about development. Until you've done that, you can't really move forward with the mapping or any of the implementation, because otherwise it's like trying to force a square into a circle, a square peg into a round hole. So yes, it does take time. And I think often that's the challenge, because development, especially if you have a funder or if you have a specific program with timelines, sometimes ABCD doesn't fit into those timelines. So you have to be able to negotiate with your funders or with the people that you're working with that this is something that is going to take time. But when you get it right, the outcome is much more agreeable than if you were to just push something through. And Dave's question, he's working in an area near Pietermaritzburg where many of the little shops have been taken over by foreigners. All the stock in the shops is bought in the cities. Community members spend at the shops and money drains straight out. There's a brilliant tool that we use when we do the financial capital called the leaky bucket. And what you do is you help people to understand that the community's income is like a bucket that's got holes in the bottom. So the water pouring in to the bucket, the money coming into the community, you can find, there's actually a way, I have a digital version which I can send you, Dave, which helps you to calculate how much money comes into the bucket. And then you look at the holes. What holes are draining the water, the money out of the community? And when people go through that exercise, their eyes are opened, where they realize we've got maybe millions coming into our community from grants or from salaries or from sales or whatever it is, and it's just going out. And by the end of the month, the community's got no money because, as you say, all of that money gets taken out. And so how do you help community members to think about how can we close up some of those holes? How can we close those holes so that the money goes circulating in the bucket and supporting the local households rather than just flushing straight out? So it's a brilliant part of the process.
Brilliant, thank you.
Understand the economy.
Okay, thank you for that response. There was also a question from Tarane on how you are managing under COVID situation.
One of the things, like with that community here in Johannesburg, it has been tough because we haven't been able to go into the community initially. So at first we were kind of just being able to mobilize funding and food parcels to keep people going, because we were meant to be doing the third part of the process, which was to help start small businesses. We haven't been able to do that at the moment, but it's amazing how people themselves, having been through those mapping exercises, they are organizing themselves. They're busy doing little things in the community to help each other, to help themselves, to at least keep going until we can open up the economy a little bit better and be able to get in. And I think that's again where that mind shift happens, where people realize that they can do it for themselves. They don't have to sit and wait for some external organization or some individual to come and guide them through a process. They learn their own value, they learn their own assets, and they start mobilizing them for themselves.
Okay, thank you, Janine. Bernard from Tanzania, you have a question? I can see you are speaking. Bernard Diego, Tanzania. Any question?
No, I don't have a question, Doctor.
Okay, thank you.
I joined you late, so I can't. I just
Okay.
follow what is presented now. Yeah.
Okay,
sure.
thank you. Thank you. We'll be sharing the presentation. It's being recorded. Thank you. You're welcome. Any further questions, you can put them in the chat or you can voice them so that Janine can respond to any comments. I'm glad that the comments that are coming through are very positive and appreciative, that we are going through a beneficial process in our this morning. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi,
Yes,
Innocent.
Innocent.
First, and I want to thank Janine for the presentation. It was so nice. Actually, it has triggered me more into starting my community development work. However, I would love her to just give me a little of insight, specifically the applicability of the ABCD approach in the rural setting and the urban setting, because you find the urban looks to be so much a hard place where to do community development work, given the time people have, the busy schedules vis-a-vis the rural areas.
Thank you, Innocent. Thanks for that question. It is slightly different depending on whether you're in a rural or an urban area.
Innocent, you might want to mute.
In a certain way, working in a rural area is easier because people sometimes do have more time. And the lovely thing about doing mapping, for instance, in a rural area is just being able to go for a walk. So one of the things that we do with the community mapping is something we call a transect walk, where you just literally take half a day and you just tell people, come, we're going for a walk. And you walk around, you look at the fields, you look at the buildings, you look at the government facilities, you literally walk around and take notes about what you see around the area. And often people forget what is there because you see something all the time. You kind of forget that there's that building and people all just know it as, yeah, I know that's that government building. It used to be for government offices, but now there's just bad guys in there. They go there and they smoke drugs and they do bad things in that building. And you kind of put it out of your mind. But if you walk around there and you stop outside that building and you say to people, what happens here? It happened with a friend of mine who was working in an area and there was this beautiful old building which was just completely run down. And there's actually a theory called the broken window theory, that if you leave a building like that to get broken, then you find that people think that that's a bad area. So then the building next door becomes broken as well, and people will move out and they'll mess that building up. And it's actually a known theory that you can look up, the broken window theory. And what they say is that you should never let buildings become like that, because what you're doing is you're just creating that kind of inner city chaos almost, where people just begin to believe that that's a bad place. If you keep fixing those buildings, keep doing things to keep those buildings looking good and being useful, you actually build up the community. And she stood there with these community members and said, what is this place? And they all said, oh, no, it's a bad place. You must never come here, especially at night. Boys come here, they rape girls in there, they take drugs, they do this, they do that. It's a very bad place. And she said, but it looks like it used to be an amazing building. And they said, yeah, it used to be a school. And in fact, some of the older community members came forward and said, my father finished his schooling in this place. It was an amazing building. And she didn't do anything other than just stop them and get them to look at that building with different eyes on that day. And she then left the area and went to work somewhere else. And 18 months later, she got a phone call from one of the community leaders of that area. And they said, please, would you come? We're having a function in our community. She had no idea what they were talking about, but she went over there and there was this building that had been completely renovated by the community members, repainted, rebuilt. They'd even added a whole extra section at the back. and she was invited to the opening of this new community building. And it was just by sitting and looking with a different pair of eyes at that place that they suddenly thought, we shouldn't just let this place become like this. We can do something about it. So often when you do that kind of a physical walking around, that's when you can get people to even start that whole mind shift where they start looking with a different pair of eyes. In the urban areas, people often focus more on the financial because they are, like Innocent was saying, in the cities we move fast, life goes quickly and people are wanting to make money and so on. But again, it's all to do with the mind shift. It's all to do with taking the time to allow people to think differently about things, to look at their community, look at their life in different ways, focus on the stories, focus on what went well before, what was your previous successes. And as people talk through that, you can see the mind shift happening and people starting to think differently. Tato, it's lovely to have you here all the way from Lesotho.
Hi, Janine. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. Tato was in one of our training sessions, 5-day training sessions in those days when we had the luxury of being able to be in the same room with each other.
Yes. Hey,
Maybe you could say, how are you using ABCD in Lesotho?
Hey. Hello.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi there.
Janine.
Yes.
Yes, that we can hear
Can
you.
you hear
Proceed.
me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can hear you.
Okay. Okay. Wow. Good seeing you, seeing you, Janine, and everybody. I'm so excited. I just love listening to you. The good fruits that I've ripened from the training is that we are not practically like using a ABCD approach, but what we are doing is that we have moved from like approaching people with deficits or needs, but what we are focusing on is basically on strength-based, the abilities and the potentials that they have as the communities. And we have now realized that the community members are the drivers of their own developments. So currently, as much as we are growing in the field of community development, but what I've learned or what I've acquired from the training, I'm practically using the tools that I've learned from the training, such as knowing that ABC help us to connect with the people, and not such as like using it like in the urban areas or in the rural areas, but it helps us to connect with the people and people understanding themselves better than the perspective of people having on them that they are people with needs, they are people with deficit. Rather, we look at them with the people who with the potential of changing their own lives.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tata. Wow. Any other comments? If you allow me, I can call out one or two of my colleagues and friends. It's easier to deal with friends than Sunday. Olawale, what's your take? The Nigerian who lives in South Africa.
Volume.
Oh, okay. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Thank you so much, Dr. Moa, for this wonderful webinar. And I would like to appreciate our presenter, Janine. Although I joined a little bit late because I was involved in another webinar, so I needed to take an excuse to quickly hear, because I know very important points are being raised here today. So I missed the presentation, but hopefully I will get the recording so that I'll be able to listen to what ABCD is all about. What I actually want to say, I don't know, maybe I should call it a question or a comment. We know that this period where we are experiencing this pandemic has really been so challenging for us. We discovered that government is trying to put a lot of resources in promoting different areas of medical initiatives by, talking to health experts, medical experts. But unfortunately, in many of our African countries, community development specialists are not being considered. For instance, currently in Nigeria, we have this problem of community transmission of this COVID-19 pandemic, and government is trying as much as possible to create awareness that, okay, if you have these symptoms, there is something you need to do and all that. So I just want to just find out how are we really coping with this community transmission in our different spaces. Do we have a situation whereby the government is trying to involve us in this contact tracing of people that are living with COVID-19 or that are not aware of them living with COVID-19? Just like a kind of response from maybe 2 or 3 of us, or if probably all of us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Sante. That's a question that goes to all of us, not necessarily to Janine. If you can maybe come on board and give our comments from our different experiences in our different countries.
I know that for us here in South Africa, we have made use of our community health care workers, the people who normally have been going around and helping people to keep track of taking their TB or their HIV medication. The government reached out and made use of that whole network, because there are something like, 18,000 healthcare workers that are community-based, and they were giving them the information and saying, please, when you go around and do your normal visits, please talk to people about COVID, talk to them about washing their hands, putting on masks and so on. So again, that's an idea of using a local asset that's already available, taking that social capital of the network of healthcare workers and enabling them to just add on to their task. So that was one good example from South Africa.
Okay, thank you. Just maybe following on what Janine has said, initially COVID was handled more as a security issue, and so the public administration teams were quite heavily involved, together with the medical teams, until to the tail end, when it was being realized that they needed to bring on board the community health workers and the social scientists to deal with the whole aspect of the behavioral aspects and the social organization aspects. And so that's the bit where now the contact tracing moved from being a security operation to more the community strategy, where now the community health volunteers and community health workers now became an important part of the chain in terms of contact tracing, and also passing on the information given by the Ministry of Health authorities. That has been our Kenyan experience. Possibly you can have experiences from other countries. Tanzania, how is the situation? and we have Ethiopia on board, and also Uganda and Nigeria. Any comments? Yeah, and Lesotho. Now that I'm seeing that CD, so that we can possibly come to a close. Any further comments, observations?
I can make a comment just about a rural area near Pietermaritzburg.
Yes.
One of the things that we've encountered there is that there's a lot of stigma, and so people do not want to be identified as being COVID positive. And because I think the percentage of people who become very ill with COVID is actually relatively small, it looks to me, and I'm not a scientist and I'm not a medical scientist particularly, but it looks to me as though many people have probably had COVID, had minor symptoms, have passed it around and have got over it. And I think there's a lot of that kind of situation happening, which means also that some of the deaths that would have occurred naturally in the area may be COVID related, but some of them are just deaths that would have occurred in a normal winter season with flu or whatever.
Wow. That's quite an observation. Well, there's always a talk that maybe many of us have already gone over the process, given that the statistics given in our country is 85% of the cases are symptomatic. People have it, they will recover and move on without ever realizing that they had it. Those who eventually go to hospital in our case is just about 2 to 5% in this country, and with very, very low fatality cases. Meaning, if we involved the social scientists, community health practitioners, maybe the approach would have been a lot more different, and the resources that are already being spent with the medicalization of COVID maybe would have gone into other interventions at the community level or supporting government processes. But this is where we are, as it were. So I think let's appreciate Janine once more, opening us now into this big world of ABCD. She shared on the chat where you can get a lot more resources and a lot more information on ABCD approaches and resources that are available, so that we can keep abreast. Of course, it's a whole world of resources and approaches and tools that need to be used to ultimately get ABCD working with us in our communities. I've reposted again, those who are not members of IACD, the link for joining IACD. You can share, for those who are members again, you can share it with your networks so that we continue growing the pool of people who are committed to community development and committed also to the ideals of IACD in our region. And I'm also indicating that in the chat that our next presentation is going to be on 12th September 2020, same time, and we'll be discussing international standards for community development practice. These are standards that are being promoted by IACD, adopted in 2018 in the World Community Conference in Maynooth. I've shared the link on the website where you can get the current translations of the standards document, starting from English all the way to the other Kiswahili and all the other languages that it's already been translated to, more than 10 languages already. And I'll make the presentation on 12th. And then of course, we'll also schedule another presentation for for October, we are having a monthly series of webinars on topics that have already been indicated by the membership of IACD in the region. And so the next topic is going to be on standards. But in the meantime, you can read the document so that as we discuss, then it will be a lot more easier. There's also a book that is already being developed around the standards, which will be launched in Nairobi in June 2020. It's a book being published by Routledge, built around the standards. And so let's also be on the lookout for that book. There was a call for case studies. The call still stands, although most people have already responded on case studies. But in the event you have an interesting case you want to share, please just document it and share with us. Then it can be used in the book that is already under preparation. But if you are going to do that, then you need to present it by the end of this month, because then the others will be moving on to now consolidating the manuscripts ready for submission to the publishers. So thank you very much. Unless there is anybody who has anything they want to say or comment. Okay, thank you very much. Then be on the lookout again for the call for the webinar. And thank you very much for finding time to be part of this great process that we are going through as IACD, Sub-Saharan African region. Thank you very much, and have a nice morning, nice afternoon, whatever the time in your region.
Thank you so much everybody. Thank you.
Take care.
Okay, thank you very much. We'll be sharing the recording once we get